to another edition of Inside BBI with John and Eric. I'm John McDevitt, and with me, as always, senior editor of Big Blue Interactive, Mr. Eric Kennedy. Eric, we don't normally do early Saturday mornings, so no beer today, but I did, and I know it'll get caught in my virtual background here. I do have I don't know what it is. It's kind of a pineapple, sort of fuzzy navel. I don't know. My wife made it. Cheers. What do you got for me?
Because I just found out you were doing that, I had my wife make a Bloody Mary with a celery stick, and I found out that it's hard to drink a Bloody Mary with a baseball cap on because the celery stick gets in the way. We're not alcoholics, people. We're Giants fans trying to figure this out.
Sorry to God. I don't have to have it, but, it helps.
So it's Saturday morning and we're already drinking. This is for San Fran Giants fan.
And if you're wondering in the background, it's intentional. The Giants don't have a brain trust, so we're trusting their bodies. So we've got three bodies: a coach, a general manager, and I guess a guy who owns the team. Cheers. Here we go.
All right.
Speaking of coach, let's start there. Last time we did the show, we knew the Giants were keeping Daboll. We knew they were keeping Shane. Now a bit of time has gone between that announcement to just the other day, and now some staff changes are starting to happen. Just some thoughts on what you saw so far. Jerome Henderson's out. That was one of the guys I thought, if we lost Bowen, might get elevated to DC. I guess I was wrong.
Well, how many people thought Bowen was coming back? So I thought it was a possibility, but most people thought he was out the door because of what Mara said. So the big news, other than Shane, which we kind of thought, most of us, I think most Giants fans figured he was coming back. And I think a lot of Giants fans thought Daboll was gone. And that was our last show and the reaction to that was, oh my God, he's coming back. But now on top of that, Bowen's coming back. So before we get to the minor staff changes, Bowen staying is a big, big deal. So we can get into why we think that happened. If you want to, I think we should discuss that a little bit, but the only two staff changes so far, and there might be more, but it's getting later. I mean, usually when they make staff changes, it happens pretty quickly. Even a couple of the beat writers were like, it's kind of odd that they made these changes already this late with the defensive back coaches. So we'll get, I don't know what you want to talk about first, but Bowen is a big deal.
Yeah, let's start there because I thought he was gone. I thought for sure he was
gone.
you
did, and a lot of people did. Yeah.
And now that's not happening. So I can't remember which, because I would love to give the credit where it belongs. Maybe you do. One of the media guys, the covers the Giants, basically said if you look at 2023 and then you look at 2024. Bowen was essentially running Wink's defense. That he basically was running if you look, you wouldn't really be able to tell the difference between the two. Do you feel there is legitimacy to that statement? And if so, could that possibly be part of the reason why they're giving Bowen, and I guess every other dead man walking on that coaching staff, another chance at this being to run his own style of defense? Because if there is no difference, and I want to know your opinion on that, if there is no difference, then really, what the hell did we get rid of Wink for to bring in a guy to just run his defense?
I don't know. I'm not an expert enough to know if there's. I don't think so. I didn't see the heavy blitz rates that we did. So I don't think it is. My guess is it was a bit of a hybrid between the two. But I don't know. I don't really know. I mean, it is odd that some people think that Wink was a much better defensive coordinator. Preface my remarks. Neither worked out. People have Giants fans have a tendency now to glamorize mediocrity. And Wink wasn't very good. He had half a season where his team got a lot of turnovers, and those, like I said before, those come and go. But his run defense was even worse, and the pass defense wasn't good, and he just had those turnovers for half a season. Bowen hasn't been good at all. He started off horrible. He had a few games where we thought, hey, it's going to get better, and then the roof collapsed. So both have been bad. I don't know I don't know why he's back, other than in fact, again, it's this continuity thing. I don't want to spend a lot of time on it, but a lot of people are. It's so head scratching to bring back everybody that we're starting to see more and more Giants fans out there wondering if there's like, and I don't think this is going on, but wondering if Mara is actually thinking more strategically at this point and saying, I know we're going to be not good in 2025 because of the schedule, because of the quarterback situation. So I'm throwing everybody under the bus this year because I don't want to bring in a new group and just have them go through that and we'll just clean house next year. So there's some people who think maybe they're just throwing away 2025 and these coaches are expendable and they're going to being used and that's why everybody's coming back. So there's some people thinking that. Some people think it's just inertia. Mira doesn't want to make any changes. And maybe Daboll's like that too. And maybe or Mara's also going, you know what? You brought in Bowen, you're gonna sink or swim with him. And I know a lot of Giants fans are like that now. A lot of Giants fans are kind of like, all right, you made your bed. Let's see how this plays out. Almost kind of like what happened with Daniel Jones this past year. It's like, all right, you picked Daniel Jones. Let's see what's going. So I don't know what do you think? I don't know what the motivation is.
It's boy, it gets to the point where almost anything is plausible at this point. You know what I mean? Like if you pick, there could be like 6 different avenues that you might have an opinion. I might have an opinion. You know, Cy might have an opinion. Gary might have an opinion. Larry might have an opinion. And each one of us could be different. And all of those might be legitimately possible based on the fact that there's just so many things at play right now that it's hard to nail down why we did what we did.
Do you think do you think Mara would is capable or willing to throw away a year?
No, no,
I don't think so.
no. In fact, if he was willing to throw away a year, then in reality, we just did that. Towards the end of this year, you did already.
In the 100th year, that's going to roll all this stuff out.
It makes no sense to do it.
More drinks.
You don't. So okay, so let's back up a couple things. Why I believe that that's not possible. One, you don't gain anything if you're John Mara by sticking with Brian Daboll in a situation where you expect to leave him 1 year later in terms of respect, accountability, believability with other coaches and things throughout the league. Because right now, everybody's looking at this going, oh my God, he's dead man walking.
Well, except one thing, and somebody brought this up on the site. I apologize. There's been a lot of discussion about this on the site, Big Blue Interactive. The upside or pro to this is coaches around the league are looking at the Giants and saying, oh my gosh, every 2 to 3 years they're changing no matter what. I don't want to go into that mess because they've gone through like 5 different coaches in less than a decade. And here's an example now where Mara is saying, no, despite the fact that you had one of the very worst years in the 100th year anniversary of the team, 100 years, this is one of the worst. Mara still didn't get rid of the coach. So he's willing to cut some. So there is an element of that.
See, I don't buy that. Only because no one's looking at this year in a positive way. You're literally looking at this, and I mean 25. You're looking at this like this guy did it for basically, I just don't want to fire a coach right now, with the concept that he's thinking ahead to firing him. That doesn't make sense to me. If that's the case, then you clean house now.
I'm just throwing it out there that people are wondering why he did what he did, and I don't completely discount it. I just don't think Mara thinks that way. I don't think you think he thinks.
No, exactly. And in my opinion,
so if you think
what you asked me,
if you think this is a weak quarterback, if the team thinks, if the owner thinks you're not going to get your next quarterback this year because of where you're picking or who's available or in free agency and the trade market and the draft. So we don't have a quarterback on the roster right now. Even he's going to be, I think, a restricted free agent. But even Tommy DeVito's not under contract. We'll get into that in a second. We don't have a quarterback
Correct.
on the roster. I don't know if that's ever happened before with the Giants. I don't remember that ever having everybody on. Anyways, we'll get into that in a second. But if you think that you're going to have a mess at quarterback, and you think that given the schedule, it's going to be bad. You can make, again, I don't think he's doing this. You can sort of say, God, let's just use them sort of expendable chess pieces, and we'll reset, not now, because whoever we bring in now is going to be, they're going to have a horrible year. We'll just reset the following year. So I think now the reason I bring this up is it's not just one or two people who have said this. There's been a number of people, not even just on our site, but other places that have wondered aloud, is there a deeper thing going on here? I don't think so, but I'm just throwing that out there. And then the other side is, Merrill will look brilliant if this works out. Everybody, I don't think it's going to work out, but if this actually works out, if Bowen is able to put together the defense, if Daboll and Kafka fix the offense, and we're like around 500 next year, and this will look great, and we'll all look like the dummies. I don't think that. And the other thing is it somewhere in between, like a deer in headlights. He didn't know what to do, so he did nothing. I don't know what it is. So I was curious. It sounds like you're struggling too to come up.
Well, I have a theory, but to answer your question specifically, I am not thinking he's thinking strategically ahead, but I do think this. And you can go back to Hard Knocks, and I think this proves the point in Hard Knocks. When you hear John Mara talk, he talks with a historical perspective on the Giants, not just 2 years ago, but 10, 20, 50 years ago.
He's living in the past. He lives in the past.
But he has a historical perspective.
Right.
If that's the case, and if I'm him, which I would love to be, but if I were him, this is how I look at it. 2024, to me, I'm going to look at that season in totality. It's the equivalent of 1983, 1995, 2003. If that's the case, what happened in every succeeding year after that? 84, the playoffs. Or 96, sorry, I meant 96, not 95. 97, the playoffs. 2004, we didn't make the playoffs, but everything was put in motion that could have taken it. The Giants could have made the playoffs, by the way, in 2004 if they wanted to. They were 5-4 with Kurt Warner at quarterback. He probably would have won a few of those games. Atlanta, Chicago, who knows, maybe the Pittsburgh game that Eli played really well in that game, but they ultimately lost. Either way, we probably win 7, 8, 9 games with Kurt Warner, but they switched at 5-4 to Eli Manning. But the pieces there for the future were now set. If you're looking at a season, you say, well, a couple things came in mind. 83. Did we have a quarterback when we left 83? We had him under contract, but there's no way Bill Parcells knew that either Scott Bruner or Phil Simms was going to be their guy, or they would not have been flirting very hard to try to get Warren Moon.
Right.
But they did. If you look at 96, who did we have? Dave Brown, Kent Graham. You had no idea who you had at quarterback. Who ultimately was the quarterback in 97 that led us to the playoffs? Danny Cannell. So you go to 03. When you left 03, we were moving away from Kerry Collins. Jesse Palmer was never going to be anything. You ultimately get Kurt Warner. We draft Eli Manning. So you can see, if you look back historically, you could say, okay, because in many ways, the stretch of 22 to 24 is similar to 81, 82, 83. The difference is 81, we had Ray Perkins was an established coach already. He had been there a couple of years. His losing years were prior to 81. They make the playoffs. The strike happens. They have a losing season, but the strike messed everything up anyway. Giants finished 4-5, I believe, that year. And Perkins takes the job for the recently deceased Bear Bryant. So he goes to Alabama. That's what makes Parcells come on board. Then we have the crash of 83, 3-12-1. and Parcells was on. That's the one that Mara hinted at, remember, when he was talking about, if I move away from Daboll, what if I'm moving away from the next Bill Parcells? What if, because I didn't have the patience? So if you look at the way they tied that together.
There's no Parcells and Daboll.
Well, and I agree. And I agree with them, but you also, I see what he's trying to get at.
Oh, I know, but
the problem is he peaked right away, and it's been this way. So I don't know what you're grasping to for Daboll per se. But if you say roster, if you tie that one other piece in, and I think this is Mara's part, if Mara was the anchor for Daniel Jones, and I think he was the anchor to try to keep Barkley as well, then right now Mara pushed all his chips onto Daboll and Shane and said, you want a quarterback, great. You can have one of those three. You can have Williams, you can have Daniels, you can have May. You cannot give up the farm to get them, but if you can work out a deal, because he said it more than once, if they can arrange a quarterback and they feel it, okay. But I think everybody after that was a no-go for Mara. At that point, it was get the best player on your board, follow your process, which they did. They got a dog. The problem is the dog needs to have a bone to be all excited, and we don't have anybody to give him the bone.
Well, the other thing, too, that ties in with what you're saying, the other motivation for Mara could be guilt. If he's the one who sort of tied the hands of Shane and Daboll by forcing the quarterback on them, then there would be a guilt factor. And again, I'm not saying I don't know what happened. I don't know that's the other thing.
There's validity to that.
There may be some guilt. Well, we don't know because
but know how people in power work though when they feel guilty. You can take responsibility, which I think he is, but then I also take that responsibility and I drop it in your lap. Oh, Yep, that was my fault. Boy, you said you could win with your guy though.
Yeah.
Here you go.
But we've also seen people on the website say Mara's just unwilling to make change. That's not true.
No.
He's made, if anything, and as he said himself, I've been too impatient. Now we could have a whole other argument whether he's been too impatient or not with his other choices, but he has made numerous changes over the last 10 years that his father would never have made. Not this quickly, not in this. So people who are, I know everyone's pissed off. And if you say anything positive or positive or not even positive, but neutral on the Giants,
right?
You're
Pollyanna, you're an idiot. Yeah.
So Mara's not. I mean, if anything, he's showed that he's willing to get rid of people. So that's why this whole situation is a little odd. A couple of things that came across this week. I mean, the response to your question too is, or your points is this. First thing before I get on to the second point is. I hear what you say, and you have a great institutional memory on the Giants and listing all these years, but I cannot get over that this is 1996 all over again coming up, and that we know that this is a lame duck situation. Again, if this works out for the Giants, Mara will come out smelling like a rose in this. He will look great. But if this goes the way that a lot of us think it's going to go, this is a throwaway year where the that we're just postponing the inevitable. And those who weren't around, Giants fans knew Dan Reeves was toast in 1996, and we just had a year with him that we knew he wasn't going to be there, and it was a miserable year. And it was just like where we were waiting just for it to be over and have a new coach and a new everything. And I just get that horrible 1996 vibe right now. And I worry that sometimes you and I are older and do we have groupthink? That's why Gary wants to come on, because Gary says
we're in agreement too much.
But I'm like, we're old guys, we're bitter. I think sometimes BBI has the reputation of being a more negative Giants fan base there. So are we being too negative? But I spent some time this week checking out other Giants sites, Giants feeds, YouTube channels. We're not in the minority on this. A lot Giants fans are really, really pessimistic and really, really down, scratching their heads about what I was hard pressed to find anybody going, hooray, Daboll's coming back, Shane's coming back.
Including Daboll, by the way. He wasn't hooray, he's coming back.
So it's not just us. So that does not mean we're condemned to a horrible year, but the overwhelming, as far as I can tell, the overwhelming number of Giants fans out there really are not excited about the upcoming year right now. And after the year that we just had, I just don't know how this is going to. I mean, I know how this is. I know. I think I know how this is going to play out, but I just don't know how it's going to play out from the Giants trying to sell this. How do they sell this to their fans that there's a product here that people want to come and watch? And I on my YouTube feed all the time now these Giants related things pop up, and one of the things that popped up this week was this kind of cool account where somebody had done the top 100 plays since 1979 in Giants history. The quality of it isn't good because he borrowed clips from here and there, and so some of the clips are, they're some of them are really old clips,
Sure.
but they're like great plays. His pick for the top 100 plays in Giants history since 1979. So I turned it on. Oh my God, is there so much fun stuff there? And I was in the room going, my wife was in the kitchen. I was going in the room. Oh my God, this is so cool. I said, I remember this. I said, you got to come here and watch this. And I'm like, I miss that. I miss looking back and Gary Reason's hit on the goal line in Denver, or they even were showing, they went as far as recent as, Odell Beckham and Saquon Barkley plays and stuff like that. And they went back, like I said, back to like Ray Perkins, like you were talking about.
Sure.
But there were all these great plays and memories and stuff with Eli Manning and Phil Simms and Lawrence Taylor and just all these great plays. And I'm like, I want that back again. And that's what Giants fans. So when you talk about Mara and you say this memory and these things, let's get back to that. And that's where I'm coming from right now. I want to do this podcast and come on here with you and go, holy crap, did you see that? That's the greatest play.
Right.
That's what I want to do.
Yeah, and then it's yeah. And it's weird.
Yeah.
Well, because it's weird too, because as you were talking, I started flashing back to God, it's funny, some shit that I can't remember anymore, like regularly, but I can go back to this stuff, no problem.
Right.
I believe it was 1980. The Giants were playing Seattle. I want to say they ultimately won the game like 20. It was a shutout, I believe. And I remember a late, like 4th and 1 play. The Giants gave the ball to Billy Taylor, who ran off to the right side of the offensive line. Ultimately, just breaks free, untouched, goes in and scores. Games like the Cowboy game late in 1980. Again, a season in which the Giants only won 4 games, but late in that year, they're playing the Cowboys, who we don't beat often. And the Giants, I believe, ended up winning 38-35, and that was the Mike Freedy game. Mike Freedy had like 100 yards receiving, picked up a big pass interference penalty late. It was Scott Bruner was the quarterback then, because I think Sims had already hurt his shoulder at that point. Things like that. 81, of course. I mean, 81 is just the turnaround of the team. It was all about LT,
Right.
Superman. People remember Gary Jeter would came on and he said, listen, he goes, I saw Superman 1, I saw Superman 2, but I played with Superman. He's right next to me. 56, where's the cape?
But I want to do fun stuff like that.
No, and
I want to get back to that, and it doesn't always even have to be like great seasons. But
that was my point. A lot of those memories I'm talking about were in seasons that weren't great. They were bad, but they ultimately led to. Now, if the Giants had never won anything, am I going to remember some of those things as fondly? Maybe not. I don't know. Right now, though, the weird thing about this Giants team since 2011. Since we won the Super Bowl, this team has consistently been meh, and then out of nowhere, there's one good year, and then meh, and then one good year. If the pattern is to change, it has to change with a coach being here long enough to do it. So I get that.
Right.
I'm not sold on Daboll, so don't anybody jump on and go, you've heard me say it. I think he should have been fired. But if you're not going to do that, and that's your reasoning, is that I'm trying to build consistency. Now, here's the other thing. They keep saying process. The process. To a lot of us, that doesn't mean anything because we don't know what it is. We haven't seen it.
Now, working.
Well, behind this, we don't know what it was behind the scenes that's been changed that they feel is better. So it's quite possible that behind the scenes it was pretty fucking ugly for years, and it
Right.
has now gotten better, and they're kind of getting to a point. We just don't know what it is. I can say, and here's one thing, you and I talked about this multiple times. I do think they have a much better feel for the draft. Guys not panning out is one thing, but they seem to be. We saw the board the way they had it for last year. They nailed across the board who was kind of going to go where. There weren't any real surprises. What we don't know, and what everybody gets all pissed off about because they're using retroactive justification. So you're looking at what's happened now and go back and say, see, they should have done this, but you don't know that then. We don't know where did they have JJ McCarthy? Where did they have Penix? And where did they have Nix in terms of with everybody else? They clearly were the tier or two below the top three quarterbacks. That's obvious. They must have been enough off from the other players that if you stick to your process, you take the best players that are available. And that's supposed to be the way the draft works anyway. But what was your plan quarterback wise? We saw that not happen. So I have a feeling that big piece, now kind of circling back, that big piece is the one thing that Mara knows that he meddled in. And he kind of kept them saying, you can do this, but you can't do this. And then get the guy weapons. I think you can build them up like you did in 22. That's kind of the hint that they've all said. They all kind of said we could get Daniel back to 22. And that seems to me that was an organizational at the top decision. If you don't get one of those main guys, you got to get him weapons and just build him back to 22. And if Daboll said, I can't. I saw what he did last year. He's not the same guy. He's just not that guy. And you should do it. And if it doesn't work, and this is where I told you a long time ago, it almost feels like they've been guaranteed of coming back. Now, I think that wavered. I think it wavered during the season. That stuff was falling apart, but they must have had some sort of behind the scenes talk that no one saw that was like, look, if you're going to force Daniel on us and we're going to do this, and if he doesn't work out, though, that's not on us. We're doing everything we can to make it work. They purposely did not bring in competition for Daniel. I can't imagine that Daboll and Shane wanted a guy to back up that they didn't want to challenge Daniel. I have a feeling that was from above.
But we remember in Hard Knocks, again, it's edited. We don't know, but they were like, "Oh, we're going to bring back the same quarterback from." Yep, okay. And again,
but that was after they didn't get their that was after they didn't get their guy. They wanted May.
No, this was before the draft. This was all Hard Knocks. So they were okay rolling back.
If we didn't get if we didn't get our guy, not we're just going to go to the draft and work.
Right. You're right about that. Yes.
Yeah. So, but that's what I'm saying though. It seems like there's a very big delineation between the top three and the next three in terms of what you were allowed to do.
Well, and I don't want to spend too much time on this because we got more interesting things to talk about. So, Giants fans out there, stay with us. We're going to talk about what's coming up in the offseason. It does create a horrible dynamic in the locker room, and there was an interesting piece by Jordan Renan about a week ago about quotes from players and who identified themselves and other ones that were unsourced. Who, again, this was sort of the typical hit piece with a coaching staff that under fire. So I've seen this type of article over and over and over again. So sometimes they're exaggerated or not. But in the article, there were a number of quotes where players were saying they confused us or we were confused. I'm paraphrasing here because of the way they handled the quarterback situation. And I understand that. So Slayton was one of the people that was on there, and Slayton, we know, was a defender of Daniel Jones. But so if you're Daniel, and we talked about this early on, if you're Daniel Jones, there's no way you watched Hard Knocks and the Giants' heavy flirtation with all the quarterbacks in the draft and come away with you have any kind of future here on this team. So that must have done a number in the Giants locker room too, because if you're in a company and you get the peek behind the curtain and you see this kind of discord, this kind of, what's the word I'm looking for? This kind of it's not upheaval, but this kind of,
it's a disconnect.
Disconnect. Sure. It's just, it doesn't feel good. And so I just think there's a lot of what I worry about with the Giants roster too is the constant losing, the constant just depressing atmosphere around it is just going to wear on people like Andrew Thomas, Neighbors, Burns, all these guys, Dexter Lawrence. I mean, it's just again we talked about again this part of the reason letting Saquon go and Daniel go and some of these other people, Beckham in the past, is there is a you do get accustomed to losing. You do get accustomed
Oh,
to,
sure.
you know. So I'm worried that again, if we throw away another year, what kind of impact is that going to have on Dexter? What kind of impact is that going to have on Andrew Thomas again? They've never really been other than the 2022 season and the one playoff game, they've never really experienced success or winning. So it's not like, again, going back to these clips and you see people like Michael Strahan, or you see people like Leonard Marshall and Phil Simms and Rodney Hampton and these people and people when that won games in the clutch when and they went in the Green Bay in 2007 and they upset a Packers team they weren't supposed to beat, or they went into
Right.
that kind of thing. You got to have players that have this. It's not just talent; it's just like this. They're just you have a special feeling for them because they did things in clutch situations, and that's kind of what I worry about. Is we if Daboll is going to make this work, he has to come back with a much better and different attitude, kind of like, and we've seen this with Bill Parcells. There were Bill Parcells that admitted that there were years that he didn't handle well. He did not handle, he said, certain years like after the Super Bowl in
Yeah, 87,
1987. He said
87.
he even without the strike, he said he expected them to pick up where they left off. And he said later on, he said, we had to start where we started again. Tom Coughlin, he said, I made mistakes and I had to change myself. So here's her two Hall of Fame type coaches who've said they had to kind of reinvent themselves a little bit. Daboll's kind of got to come back and he's got to have a completely different attitude. Um, because I don't get a lot of inspiration from him as a fan. I can't imagine the team, that locker room. They've got to start believing in what. So that if, those who haven't seen it, go back and read that Renan article. It's about a week old. It's got a number of interesting but depressing quotes in it, and that's what I worry about. So maybe we should look forward and talk about what
Well,
we need to do
there's
moving forward. Oh, you want to talk about the
well,
coaches that left too?
well, hold on. I'm
Yeah,
gonna stick to with what you just said. One tiny little thing. The Parcells bit from
yeah.
'87. How he knew, or you knew that he knew something was wrong. The last preseason game of 1987. Again, this is my Giants mind at work. Last preseason game in 1987, I believe was the last one, fourth game. They played the Pittsburgh Steelers. In the fourth quarter, Parcells put back in Taylor, Banks, basically the starting defense. Sims was back on the field because he was pissed that they just were not clicking, and he put
Right.
them back on the field in a preseason game. The other thing is that what you just talked about, the mentality piece is very true. But I'm gonna say this: there are two very distinct but different things that are absolutely true about anything. A TV show, a car, the team, whatever. There is reality and there is perception. You can affect one of those before the other. You can affect perception before reality. And the way you affect perception, if you're on the team, the way that's affected for you is you see something different that brings a bit of energy, that brings a bit of a different mindset. So the reality isn't there yet. You haven't done anything to prove it, but the perception becomes there. And how does that happen? That's what we'll be talking about as far as the offseason plan goes. But if you're going to change the Giants and if you want to avoid that stigma, the stink, the weight of losing on some of those guys, not everybody, because by the way, teams change a lot differently now than they did when we were growing up. The 80s heyday, guys were on the team until they weren't on the team. Now these guys change out pretty regularly. I mean, the roster flips probably on a good 25 to 30% almost
Yeah.
every year.
Yeah.
So that some of that doesn't stay, but your long-term stalwarts, the guys you're really counting on and the ones that we're paying a lot of money to, you can't have them be just cumbersome, worn down, beaten down with
Right.
losing.
That's what I'm getting at. Yeah.
So you got to change the perception, and that's the offseason bit that we'll talk about coming up and stuff. But that is step one to everything. I don't care what Daboll does on the field yet. That won't matter until September. What does matter is the steps you take going into there, and what we do now. If you're going to change the energy of this team, it's got to be something different than what you've done.
Well, and that ties into the thing that we should talk about briefly, really quick too. So the coaching changes that they did make so far is that they fired the defensive backs coach slash defensive passing game coordinator, who Daboll just promoted last offseason.
Who was up for defensive coordinator,
Who
by
was
the way.
up
He
for
did
defensive
interview.
coordinator last year. And I think they gave him that other title as a consolation prize.
Yeah. Yeah.
Kind of like what they did with Kafka. When Kafka, they demoted him from play calling, they gave him, made him assistant head coach, that kind of thing. So, but they the safeties coach, Mike Trier, who also I believe was promoted 2 years ago to that position. So guys that have been promoted fairly recently were let go, and that is interesting in the sense that it gets back to what your original point was, is Bowen, since he's coming back now, is he getting a chance to remake the staff in his image? And again, if it is, it's one of these things, it's whack-a-mole again. It's one of these, they're reacting to something. Why, if you were going to do this, they should have done it last offseason type of thing. Now their backs are against the wall. But so it's going to be interesting to see if there's other defensive changes. But Jerome Henderson's interesting to let go because he's the one guy that Wink loved. Wink kept saying he's one of the best defensive back coaches in the NFL. He was well liked by the reporters because he was such a good interview. The players seem to like him, I think. But we've got and we'll get into this, we have the Deonte Banks situation, and you have to start to wonder, was he let go because people like Banks had a horrible year and there weren't a lot of turnovers in the secondary? I mean, the safety.
And Henderson called him out on it. Henderson called him out for his play too.
And
I
which
wonder.
Daboll doesn't like.
Yeah, no, yeah.
Publicly.
Yeah, exactly.
Daboll
Publicly
doesn't
said
like.
it.
Yeah. So I was personally shocked that Henderson was let go. I didn't see that one coming. And they let both guys go. So, I don't know if there's another shoe going to drop here or not, but what was your reaction to that?
Well, I wasn't shocked just because of the connection to Wink.
Yeah.
And Wink and Daboll did not get along. That's pretty obvious. The Daboll's biggest failing, I think, as a coach, besides his record, would be just the way the interaction within his own staff has not been great. He's put staffs together, and then we've gotten rid of people pretty quickly. So clearly, either he's tough to work with, or he's not very good at picking the guys to work with.
Well, yeah, that has to be. You can't come away with any other impression than what you just said, because he keeps firing or getting rid of the guys that so people remember Wink didn't bring in Henderson. Henderson was here under
Correct.
Joe Judge's staff. So Henderson wasn't a Wink guy. He was already here. And so was the safeties coach. So these are guys that Daboll retained, and now he's letting go. And so we're getting in a situation where guys repeatedly now that Daboll hired, and now he's firing 2 or 3 years later. And this is just another. But
example. if your career is on the line, which it is currently,
it is, yeah.
Then I'm going to get rid of anybody who I think might not have been fully on board with me, who might have ties to somebody else. And I'm going fully all out. If it were me, I'm going all out my way. That being said, where I was surprised is you couldn't have made this decision kind of like this long afterwards. You knew already. What took so long? Was it you had to get approval to do this? You didn't sit down and go, you know what? Our secondary really sucked, and I guess we'll keep you, but we're going to get rid of the DB coach. I think you knew ahead of time. What took so long?
But did they? Because you had Mara. Would Mara have come out and said the things that he said about the defense if they knew Bowen was coming back? I don't think he would have said that. So what you're arguing, I think, tell me if I'm wrong. You're arguing that they knew Bowen was coming back when
Yes.
Mara spoke, but
Yes.
if Mara, then why did Mara say what he said?
I think he put Daboll on notice even further. I think whatever. Here's the thing: if let's say you're John Mara, right? You're John Mara. I'm Brian Daboll. You meet with me, and let's just say this little dude over here with no head is Joe Shane, but he is Joe Shane right now too. So Joe Shane's over here, and you and I are talking. You are asking Joe Shane what my plan is, John Mara. You're asking me, what is your plan if I'm going to retain you? And I give you my plan. That had to include what I was going to do with my staff. You're not going to go, I'm going to let you figure it out after the season. That's not a plan. If you are, then John Mara, you're worse than I thought. You're gonna lay out a plan, and Daboll must have already known ahead of time he had to come up with a plan. And you're gonna say, this is what we're doing. And let's go back to what I said at the beginning. If it's true that Bowen, who came in late, he was not the first choice of defensive coordinators, but it's who they ultimately got. If it's true that Bowen kind of ran a lot of the schemes similar to Wink because of personnel, and we could have. I mean, I still don't really understand our D-line edge combo bullshit. Can we just go back and play an actual 3-4
Well, and why
or
did
4-3?
and this has been brought up before? Why did the run defense get better after Dexter was out of the lineup? And Dexter had a great year. It wasn't Dexter not having a bad season. So the schemes that they were using didn't seem to make a lot of sense, and they were able to adjust. So yeah, I'm sorry to interrupt, but
No,
yeah.
you're fine. So I think there's a lot there. And by the way, I actually have an answer to that question. Don't take once you got to a certain point in the season, don't take anything that happened as gospel to what was better, not better, whatever. We played a lot of teams that weren't so great later on too, so that's a little weird. Although they still ran the ball on us. I think it got better because we overly committed to trying to stop the run, and you had a bunch of gung-ho guys who could go run, but we couldn't get to the quarterback if our life depended on it for a long time. So they were still able to run, but just not as well. But other teams didn't care. They were just throwing the ball and doing whenever they felt like doing, they did whatever they wanted to do. So nothing really changed. So if that's the case, Daboll laid out his plan. I've got to assume that part of that plan also meant that you're going to get rid of some guys. Now, like you said, Henderson was there with Judge and Wink. That's got to be somewhat of a thing you had to run by Mara. Mara had to be okay with keeping a legacy coach across multiple head coaches. Like, why? Normally, people clean house.
If
You
he's
don't keep
involved in
anybody.
that but if Mara's involved in that level of micromanagement, we're in trouble.
I don't think he does it day to day, but I think there's a thing like it says, well, tell me why. And then I would want to know that too. If you came to me and said, I want to fire Jerome Henderson, and I was like, yeah, but your defense was horrible overall. Why are you just getting rid of the one guy? Because he's this, or he was tied to this. We want to run this scheme. That's not what he does well. Bowen's going to stay. We need a guy that's going to work with him the way he wants to run his defense. Okay, that's legitimate. Say that. But don't just fire a guy. If you fire the defensive backs coach for the performance of the defense last year, then I don't know what the hell you're doing, because the whole defense sucked.
Yeah, there's
So
a
yeah,
lot of head scratching here. We're all speculating. That's the thing. This could all work out, or this could all just be. And a lot of the guys that are going to leave this team, it might be the best thing for them. I mean,
so why do you?
Henderson might be the best thing for like Saquon Barkley and
But why do you think? Why do you think they keep blocking Kafka from interviewing anywhere else?
I don't know. Kafka's got to be like, how the hell do I get out of this?
He's like a prisoner.
They strip him of his responsibilities, but they won't let him leave. But everybody else can get out of Dodge. I know Kafka's got to be like, what do I have to do?
I know, like he's almost the, you know how we used to say, was it Tom Quinn? We used to say that Tom Quinn had pictures of somebody, and that's why he was able to say. Kafka's like the other way around. It's almost like we have pictures of something with him, and he's like, oh, okay, I'll just stay.
So it seems like, if you're reading the tea leaves, it seems like, and you and I talked about a little bit about this, and we should move on because we want to get to the roster.
Yeah.
But it seems like, excuse me, it seems like Kafka might call the plays again because of what Mara, you and I talked about. Did Mara basically tell Daboll, "I don't
Sure
like you
seemed like
calling the
it.
plays"?
Sure
And
seemed
if
like it.
so, if that's what they're doing, and they go back to Kafka, that's even a bad look too. Because so then now they're going to go back to the way they were. And you could say, well, at least they're admitting the mistake, so there's something positive to say that. But it's just the whole thing just looks like flip-flopping and back and forth, like the Saquon stuff. So we want Saquon, we don't want Saquon, we want Daniel Jones, we don't want Daniel Jones. Kafka's going to call the plays. No, he's not. Now he is. The whole thing. That's why I get in this. Like I said, this whole thing just stinks to high heaven. I hope I'm wrong. I want it to work out, but it just doesn't. It just smells bad to me right now.
I think the hardest thing, and then we'll switch it up.
Yeah.
I think the hardest thing, quite frankly, is it's like you and I talking about it right now. And I know some people, Gary, think that we agree on everything. And I'm going to tell you deep down, we've talked about this before. We don't always agree exactly on. There's a lot but there's a lot that you can't deny. Like if either one of us tried to deny really what's happening, it would be disingenuous. But I think you and I have different views on different things and why certain things are the way that they are. I just think if this is the case, if it were me, if I'm Brian Daboll, I bring all my coaches in, whoever ultimately some of them are going to be. I sit down and say, listen, we all know that it's a year-to-year league anyway, but it's no more reality than it is for this coming year for us. It's either we improve this thing and we win, or we're all going to be looking for stuff elsewhere. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to put aside everything that's happened before this season. If you got issues with me, I got issues with you, it's all being put aside. We are 100% moving forward with a mind of this. Your job is going to be this. I'm going to give you that autonomy to do that. We will work together on some things, but you're calling the plays. You are going to get our quarterbacks up and ready. I'm assuming that's Tierney or whoever. It's defense, same thing. You bring those guys together. That's step one of getting and just saying, remember when we were doing the F it? We were like, F it. And that's what they have to do right now. F it. This is what we're doing for 25.
Which quarterbacks? We don't have any quarterbacks.
Well, that's where we're going to start talking about the offseason plan. So with that being said, I don't think we probably shouldn't expect any more surprise coaches going here or there. It seems like the Giants, they'll fill some of those holes, but I can't imagine they'd be moving on unless out of nowhere Bowen goes to New England.
Oh, no, I don't think that's going to happen now, but I wouldn't be shocked if some other defensive coaches leave. I don't know. Losing Henderson was kind of a big deal because again, he spanned two head coaches, and he was respected within the organization. What if they let go of somebody like our defensive line coach who Dallas wanted a year or two ago? I hope they don't because Andre Patterson's one of the best, if not the best in the business. But if Bowen's on the hot seat. I mean, we thought Bowen was gone anyways. So Bowen might be like, I want my guys here. If you want me back, I want my guys here, and I'm going to sink or swim with my guys, and I can't work with these people. So I wouldn't be shocked if there's another coach let go, but the longer this goes, obviously, the less likely it becomes. So I don't know.
Yeah, I would think
somebody tweeted out, it might have been Stapleton, somebody like that said, this is the beginning. They're just the beginning.
I can't imagine at this point, with the fact that all the other teams that are looking for head coaches, which means they're looking for whole staffs, are still out there. New England's filled theirs. You don't know what might happen in Tennessee now that they have a new GM. I'm assuming they're keeping the coach, but maybe not. New Orleans needs a coach still. Chicago, by the way,
who wants to come here though? The other thing, why would you want to come here?
Well, we've talked about Lou, but Lou is interviewing with Atlanta for their defensive coordinator. I think he's going to have opportunities elsewhere.
They all are.
But one thing I want to throw out there, coaches, it was brought up on the site by somebody. I don't know where the hell he got his thing, and he put it out there, and he made it seem like he had inside info, and then nothing happened. The Chicago Bears reached out to the Pittsburgh Steelers about possibly trading for Mike Tomlin, and they were completely shot down. They were shot down. And as far as what I read from Adam Schefter this morning, Mike Tomlin's not going anywhere. So for those of you who think Pittsburgh's going to suddenly get rid of Tomlin, Tomlin would be available. It ain't happening this year.
There are Pittsburgh Steeler fans who want Tomlin gone. Can you imagine having that kind of luxury?
If you look at his playoff record, but I will say this. This is one of the arguments I've had with a couple people on the site. Their idea is we got to get a quarterback, you got to get a coach that's all about just winning the Super Bowl. And the goal is to win the Super Bowl. But you do know there's only one of 32 teams that wins that every single year. I would rather at least be able to possibly win the Super Bowl, which means my hat's in the ring year in and year out, than going through stretches like we've been going through since 2011, which has been nothing but just embarrassment, depression when it comes to your team. I mean, they've done so many things that are so embarrassing as a fan. You're just like, oh my God, not again. I would rather be Pittsburgh. And Tomlin's playoff record, by the way, is worse than Mike McCarthy's. So he consistently gets there and they lose consistently. I would rather be that team that's always in it and takes teams that might not even be roster-wise. You're like, oh, we're not that good. Next thing you know, they're 10-7 and they're in the playoffs. I'll take that. Then be a team that's, I thought they might be able to maybe get a wild card and we finished, 3-14.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, I'd rather win a Super Bowl once a decade than be somebody who's always in the playoffs but never wins the thing. But the problem is we're neither right now. So I had this argument when we set up BBI back in the 90s that if you had to choose between a consistent winner all the time but that never got the ring, or somebody who got the ring once a decade but was not, I'd rather have the ring. But we're not either. So it's an easy argument right now that you're saying about let's have the team that at least is that's the thing. We just want some stability at this point right now. Just to us, a winning season right now is like barely getting a winning season. Being one game over 500 to us is like great. We're so far away from being competing with the Kansas Cities of the world and the Eagles this year. I mean, it's so night and day different. So we can get into that now with the personnel.
Yeah,
maybe we should move on to that
because we're going to keep these. We're going to keep this a little bit tighter.
No, we're not.
Well, we are, but we're not as tight as I thought. So we're already past that mark. But so let's kind of look at. Okay, so one other thing I will say real quick with the coaches, I do still think at some point in the next couple of weeks, I could be completely wrong, but I think the Giants will somehow add to their offensive staff. I think we'll bring Ken Dorsey on. I think Ken Dorsey is going to be brought on. He has a connection with Daboll. I think where does he go?
What position now?
Well, that's the position. There isn't, but I think you can find one. He could be an offensive assistant.
Well, then you have too many cooks in the kitchen at that point, wouldn't you? Or
you would, but if I'm going now again,
imagine Kafka in that situation. Imagine if Dorsey comes on and is the play caller.
Well, the other thing is,
let me go.
We could still let Kafka go if somebody else gets a head coaching job and says we want him to come on board as our
offense.
But
wouldn't that reek of again this Mickey Mouse opera? I mean, you're right.
It would seem like it would seem like I'm Brian Daboll gathering all of my minions that I can to make one last chance to stay here. That's what I would think.
Yeah.
But I thought for sure that Kafka would be gone. I thought he would just let him go because, I mean, God, the guy seems so unhappy, and we don't seem to give him. What role does he have?
I don't know, but somebody linked to an article on Dorsey on the site. I apologize for not remembering who, and I read it and I was like, oh my God, Dorsey. And again, everyone usually has an agenda, not usually, often has an agenda. And when you see articles like this, but it was a complete hit piece on Dorsey and how he wasn't very good handling people and handling responsibility. And normally I wouldn't put too much stock in it, but it was by a reporter who I respect. I can't remember her name. It was she used to write for the Giants years ago for ESPN or somebody, but she was Aditi. I can't remember her name.
Oh, I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, but it was like, oh, whoa, I didn't realize that about him. So if
I did not see
her, I would have been more like, the typical hit piece. But so anyway, yeah, we'll see. but yeah, when we come on, we should do short videos when they make coaching changes and discuss that, like quick 15, 20-minute video discussing. So if that happens this week or next week, we'll
Yeah,
just
we'll
come
jump
on
on.
and do a quick video on it. So
So now we're looking at the off season, and we're going to kind of keep this really high level as we will later break into very specifics. So first thing is just kind of the landscape of the team. And as you've already said, we have, including Tommy DeVito, we have absolutely no quarterbacks actually under contract. DeVito's I believe, an exclusive right free agent, but we do not have anybody who's under contract going into 25.
no quarterbacks under contract, but I was looking at who are going to be free agents, and we're not in bad shape in terms of, again, how you can question how good the roster. We don't have a lot of tough free agent decisions. So
Right.
the only ones that, and this still pisses me off, they should have dealt Slayton and Ojulari before they left. They're going to probably leave for different reasons, but both are probably want to get out of Dodge, and we should have dealt them because had a losing record already. We're going to be awful. They knew we were going to be awful. They should have dealt them, and Aziz ended up on IR like he always does a couple weeks later. But they don't have their toughest free agent decision is Jason Pinnock, is the safety. That's the one guy that a starter who who's probably going to want more money than the Giants may want to pay him, and they've got Dane Belton who might be able to just slide right in there and take over. But they don't have a lot of tough decisions in free agency, but they have no quarterbacks on the roster. And looking at the offense, I think a lot of Giants fans have it. The biggie is the quarterback. No, we have no quarterbacks. And you and I talked offline a little bit before we got on here. A lot of what they want to do would be so much easier had the draft picks that they made in 2022 and 2023 worked out. Because if Jalen Hyatt was a player, then wide receiver wouldn't be a big need. But now wide receiver is a big need because you've got Wandale as a slot guy, and you have of course Malik Neighbors as the outside guy. But if Slayton leaves and you don't think Hyatt can handle it, now you need another wide receiver. So some people even think we might spend big bucks on a wide receiver in free agency. So wide receivers, and the other spot on offense that came up to me other than that is the right guard position. If Evan Neal if you could trust him, not just as his ability to play, but his ability to stay on the field, because he keeps getting hurt. He got hurt again this year.
Right.
So
Right.
if you could slide him into right guard, then you would almost be like, well, you know what? We just need to get a backup swing tackle and maybe some draft a depth piece that someone to compete with Schmitz, that kind of thing. But right now, because Neal is this big unknown bust, we got to look at right guard now because I don't think many people want Van Roten coming back at right guard. So before we move on defense, to me, I want to hear from you. Um, those are the big things. And the thing that's out there that no one wants to talk about right now because everything else is so depressing. We got two players with Liz Frank injuries, Theo Thomas and Andrew Thomas. I mean, Theo Johnson and Andrew Thomas. There's a word there's a reason why they put the word dreaded before Liz Frank usually because that's a bad injury. So unless they've gotten a lot better with those in sports medicine, we got to keep our fingers crossed on Theo Johnson and we got to keep our fingers crossed on Andrew Thomas because those are two pieces we can ill afford not being ready and at 100% in September. So those are the ones that stood out to me on offense.
Yeah. So real quick, the Giants are 13th in cap space, which unfortunately, although Joe Shane likes to talk about it like we did something amazing, the only reason we're even there is because you dropped Daniel Jones. We still have 27 million in dead cap money, which I don't care about dead cap money. I care about cap space, but we're still 13th. There are many teams that have a lot more cap space than us. On offense, Thomas is the one that worries me the most because we gave him a lot of money and he's tied in long term. And he has yet to be able to stay on the field since that time. Since he signed that contract, he's been injured twice. And he's had a lot of lower leg injuries, period, since we brought him on board. And those don't get better when you're 6'5", 330, 340 pounds. Those things tend to show up over and over again. So I'm a little concerned about Thomas with the money. Neal is a complete bust unless you can move him to guard. He's not a tackle. He played at the end of the year, but again, he was poor.
And
We didn't.
you can't count on him. You can't rely. He's
Oh,
not
he.
dependable. You know, the
Yeah,
year.
he says everything but that.
Yeah.
He
So
might be smart. I
he
don't
may
know.
be smart, but he's not tough and dependable.
But his
So
comment about flipping burgers wasn't the most
yes.
intelligent
Well,
thing he
yeah,
ever
there you
said.
go. He's not your STD. So you don't have any STDs, Neal. Yeah. Okay.
Illuminor gives us a little bit of value and flexibility. I think they should try to re-up Illuminor. I think they should try to give him a couple of years, and then that way it lessens his hit for this coming year, spread it out over a couple more. So add a couple years, because he only did really a 2-year deal, which was essentially a 1-year deal in his mind, as he kept saying it over and over again. But it's a 2-year deal. But I think we should just extend him. Illuminor is a guy we really can count on. You can play him at left tackle, you can play him at right tackle, you can play him
But
at
look,
guard.
there's another knock on the coaching staff. So Thomas goes down, and their first response was to put Zudu at left tackle again, not put Illuminor, who you called for when we
Right.
did that show. You did.
And he kept saying, we don't want to make all these
These
changes. And I'm like,
changes. Yeah.
but
So, but the coaching staff screwed that up, and they had to change it the following week. So that's one of the biggest needs on this team is we have to have a backup swing tackle because of Andrew Thomas.
well, you didn't even touch on center.
Yeah, center's a big. I don't even want to think of having to replace. See, that's the thing that they talk about the process. They're keep pointing to the draft, but the first 2 out of the 3 drafts have not been good. So,
And you could say
yay for the
Schmitz.
process.
You could say Schmitz was a forced pick, not the position, but that you picked a position and you just said, I got to get a guy. Versus a center in a second round, sure, if they're quality, but if you forced to say I have to get a center,
Right.
no matter what, then you basically went against your rule of slotting players. So I'm not really sure.
Well, Schmitz was pretty highly regarded by a lot of people. Now, Cy didn't like him, but there were a ton of people because of the draft nicks out there, the draft guides, and all these things. There were a lot of Giants fans who were hoping to get Schmitz in the second round and didn't think that would even be possible. I mean, heck, you even had Lawrence Tynes out there at the draft going, we want to get, he was predicting, I hope we get Schmitz in the second round. So Schmitz hasn't worked out. Schmitz was one of those guys that was a better college player than he was a better pro so far. So unfortunately, I was right about him. A lot of people were really wrong about him.
If a guy's up here on his ability, meaning he's at that ceiling of his ability, then I want him to be an overachiever that I get in the 3rd, 4th, 5th round, not in the 2nd or the 1st round, because usually those guys, I want room for them to become even better.
That's where Cy was. You're arguing where Cy was arguing.
Because look at Jason Kelce. We assume Jason Kelce will be a Hall of Famer for the number of years center, right?
All right.
He was a late round pick. So if you're going, a lot of centers are just guys that you get later that become real. Even guards are guys you get later. The Giants need to become much better at matching the skill set to the scheme you want to run versus the skill set in a slotted system of player availability on a draft. Those are not the same thing. Brock Purdy was a 7th round draft pick by the 49ers. If they redid that draft, the 49ers probably take Purdy much earlier because once they got him in their system, they found a guy that was perfect for their system.
Right.
I think a Quinn Ewers is a guy that's probably going to go to a team like the 49ers. He's going to end up doing pretty well because that system matches him.
Right.
Bo Nix went to Denver. That matched him. Bo Nix with the Giants might give us some inspiration because we have a rookie quarterback. I don't think he would have played as well because we're not the same team that Sean Payton runs out there.
That's a good point. And Cy's made the same point with Ewers, I think, that you just did with the 49ers. I think he said that too, so on Twitter. So
I think as far as the offense goes, you did say one thing that I'm kind of on board with. It depends on how we arrange our money. The Giants should go out and at least make an attempt to get T. Higgins. Now, I know we need a quarterback. So before people jump off the freaking building or scream and tell me I'm an idiot, I know we need a quarterback. My assumption is they know it too, and they're going to try to get one. But you need a receiver that's different than all your other receivers. Neighbors is Neighbors. Wandell is Wandell, and he's different, but he's different for a whole different reason. Your two starters should have different skill sets, not the same skill set. T. Higgins brings size. He brings something we don't have. We need a guy with some height. We need some guy that can play that jump ball, but he's got long speed. He makes catches in traffic. Neighbors is a guy that I think can be the sort of a Jamar Chase type, although he didn't show everything that Chase did. But what does Chase have on the other side? Higgins. What did Dallas have years ago when they had Michael Irvin? They had Alvin Harper on the other side. You need that other different guy who brings something different to the table that you can have, and we just don't have one. We don't. Our big receiver was Isaiah Hodgins. He's slow as hell, and then couldn't even get on the field this year. Wasn't even on the roster most of the time. Bryce Ford Wheaton is special teams only. We have never seen him play offense other than in a preseason game. I have no idea what he could do, but I know that probably not going to be a starter.
John, we only have 4 wide receivers under contract right now. Only 4.
Yeah, so
that's
we're drafting
really
some
low.
for sure.
And that's really low going into an off season for the Giants. I've been doing this a long time, but they've got Neighbors, Robinson, Hyatt, and Ford Wheaton under contract. That's it. So wide receiver is a big need on this team that a lot of people don't realize. Slayton's not coming back, I don't think. I mean, he could. I don't know why he would want to. I mean, they would have
and the Giants shouldn't want him back. No offense.
Not with those numbers. I mean, not. I wouldn't give him the contract that he's going to want with the numbers that he every year puts out. Again,
but I don't want a guy that speaks out the way that he did towards the end. Number one. Number two, I don't want a guy that's been part of a consistent losing environment. You've done nothing to bring but you have been part of a lot of big time drops and other stuff throughout that time. It's nothing really bad about Slayton. Go live your truth with another team. The Giants need to move on from that.
I like that. Go live your truth with another team. Good one. All right. I like that. I like that. Yeah, that's another one that you've got. There was that other one that organizational arrogance. I'll put that up there with live your truth. Okay.
So we our cupboard is bare at wide receiver.
It's thin. And now again, top heavy. Malik Neighbors is the real deal. As long as we can keep his attitude in line. And I'm a little bit higher on Wandell Robinson than others. I think with a real quarterback, I think he's okay and might be even more than okay. We have to see.
I agree.
Hyatt's got talent, but he had a horrific year. I mean, he had like 60 or 80 yards. Yeah, I mean, that's bad that what he had. And he had about 30% of the snaps. So I went back and I thought, well, he must not have played that much, but he got about 30% of the snaps. So wide receiver is a sneaky big need on this team that no one's talking about. So I think if I was going into the offseason offense, again, quarterback's a headliner, but wide receivers up there. You can always add offensive linemen. Obviously, there's a hole at right guard, unless you like Kubis. Kubis could sneak in there,
which I like.
And then pray that Theo Johnson's foot is okay. Manhurts is a free agent, kind of I'd look to bring him back as a cheapie if he's willing to do that, because I thought as a situational blocker he was okay. But the other thing that kind of I would keep an eye on is when I was looking at the salary of this team, they really, this is one of the things I don't really understand why we're always against the cap. The Giants are really only paying 3 players, besides all the dead money that's going to Daniel Jones. There's only 3 players that are really getting over $20 million per year in terms of a salary cap hit. It's Burns, Thomas, and Dexter Lawrence. We're not spending a lot of money on our roster. So how the hell, I just don't understand how we're always against the cap. But feeding into that is one of the guys who is overpaid right now is Devin Singletary. So he's not astronomically expensive, but a backup running back, and it's a very deep draft at running back. I would probably add another running back in the draft in the mid rounds in a deep running back draft to kind of maybe get cheaper at that position too. So I'm going to go with a more physical guy to go with
Yeah,
Tracy.
I agree.
But those are my big moves on offense. It doesn't sound as big as it's not as terrible on paper as I think a lot of people think it is, provided Andrew Thomas is all right and Schmitz isn't a disaster at center. I don't think it's as dire as people think, but quarterback. It's easy to say, well, we just got to fix the quarterback. Well, how do you fix the quarterback position? That's probably you and I we could spend a whole show on that.
Yeah, I think.
But free agency is going to tell us, I think, is going to telegraph their draft plans to a certain extent.
Well, I think not only their draft plans, but I think it telegraphs exactly what they think they could do this year. If they just get Fields, they're basically trying to recreate 22, and they'll draft a guy, but then that guy has to have somewhat similar skill set to Fields, because you're going to be gearing the offense in a a la Daniel Jones kind of setup, but with even less passing ability, by the way, than what Jones had. So you're going to be doing a lot of RPO stuff. You're going to be doing a lot of, we're going to do some quick fake handoffs and throws, or we're going to do design runs for the quarterback. So your draft quarterback needs to be very similar, or you're spending a lot of time training this other guy to run an offense completely different than the guy that's going to be out there, and you can't do that. If they go a different route and they go a Cousins, I can't see Stafford coming as much as I'd love to, but if they go Cousins or Darnold, if he's let, the Vikings don't bother trying to get him, if he's out there, if they go that route, or, and this is the one I'm kind of leaning a little bit more towards, or they go an Aaron Rodgers, then they're going for, we're trying to win now with a guy who can run an offense, who can pass. They know they have a scheme. It's worked before. If you get more players out there, which is what you did with Neighbors, which is what we hope we've got with Johnson, which is what you've got with Tracy, and you would like to think Hyatt could develop into something in Wandell, a better quarterback should get more out of those guys. So I think that will dictate a lot. What they do in free agency, it has to be at least one quarterback.
Oh yeah, they got to get at least one. By the way, I had a cat jump in my lap, so if you see a tail flopping around here, yeah, they got to get it. They have no quarterbacks under contract. DeVito's either exclusive rights free agent or restricted free agent. I'm not sure yet, but he'll probably be back unless they don't tender him. It'd be really odd if they just let him go now after keeping him on the roster all year, but they might. I mean, so I don't know what to expect at the quarterback position, but they got to get at least one veteran quarterback, and then they may draft a quarterback. So it'll be interesting to see if they get one or two veterans in free agency, and they got to get one. But if they got two veterans in free agency, that makes you a little more suspect about what they're going to do in the draft. So it'll be the most interesting thing is that I didn't even think of Rodgers until you brought him up in the last podcast, and that would be weird. But they need a quarterback, so I don't know what they're going to do.
But again, perception, right? Like, if you want to tell somebody things are different.
Yeah,
and we are
including the players, by the way.
That's what I'm really talking about. I could care less what the fans think if I'm part of the team, but I do care about what the team thinks.
Yeah,
and if I want the team to think we are wiping away last year and we're legit going after it, do I think Rodgers is anything what he used to be? No, but go look at his goddamn stats.
Oh, it's not that. It's the other stuff. It's the other stuff with him. The stuff that he goes on and does these media appearances. So the good news is he's been sort of humbled. He's been acclimated to the New York area,
and he's been humbled a little bit too.
Yeah. So
see, the biggest problem that they had from the day one, and I think it was the ultimate downfall why Saleh got fired earlier. And I know a lot of people are like, I don't know why you'd fire Saleh, blah, blah. This is why. Go back and look at the Jets' Hard Knocks And look at when they were leading up to playing the Giants in the preseason game, right? They weren't playing Aaron. They weren't going to play him. Saleh's talking to Aaron. They're talking to everybody about how great it is that they have Aaron Rodgers and Aaron Rodgers this and Aaron Rodgers that. I mean, you would think Rodgers was the guy who brought Saleh on board. That's how much Saleh.
Oh yeah,
was,
yeah. That's what I
was,
mean, and that's why I have a hard time seeing Mara signing off on that. We'll see.
But I don't.
The other thing is does Rodgers want to end his career on this horrific Giants team? I don't know if he wants to do that. I mean, does he want to go out this way, going on, as a New York Giant under Brian Daboll and Joe Shane?
He mentioned something, and I thought it was interesting, and I thought it was on purpose. And that was a few weeks ago. He mentioned how he would like to be in New York. He did not say the Jets. And a lot of people jumped on that. Now, do I think it's going to be him? It seems like an anti-Giants move.
It does.
But it would also tell me that you're legit trying to win.
Yeah, well, look, and then we'll move on to defense here. But look, Daboll, Bowen, Kafka, all these people I've got to win or they're gone. Shane, maybe not, but Shane's on the hot seat, I got to think, too. I got to win. So getting a vet in here makes a ton of sense. My big worry, and I said it over and over again, they hook a long-term deal to somebody, then they fire the coaching staff, and then the new coach or potential new coaches say, I'm not going to coach the Giants. I don't want to be stuck with Sam Darnold. I don't, that kind of thing.
So 2 things before we switch to defense. Contract-wise, if the Giants were to somehow work out an extension with Illuminor, they could probably save upwards of $3 million on the cap this year. Okay. Secondly, you mentioned Singletary. He's $6.2 million on the cap.
He's not cheap. He's
definitely cheap. But next after that, as far as I'm concerned, is somebody we should do something with is Graham Gano. Graham Gano he's on the cap for $5.6 million. Well, we don't need a 37-year-old kicker making $5 million.
They've got a number of decisions at special teams. Gano there was a 3-year run where you could make the argument that Gano was the best player on this team, which included Andrew Thomas and Saquon Barkley. He was, in terms of field goal percentage, he was the highest. He was up there. I mean, he actually set the Giants record one year, but he was Mr. Reliable. But he's been hurt 2 years in a row now, and he makes a lot of money, and he's old. So
right.
Gillen is a free agent. And Kreider's a free agent again. So both long snapper, punter, place kicker, they may sweep the deck from all these guys. So special teams could completely be revamped.
I would be happy. Get another punter. I don't care.
He's got a strong leg, but he's and if you look at the rankings, he's nothing to write home about.
And it's going to cost us more than what you want to. Smart teams make smart choices. Just because we're 13th in cap space, it's still not great.
Yeah.
Shane can say whatever he wants. You're 13th in cap space with no quarterbacks.
Yeah.
That's a problem.
Yeah.
The Steelers have a ton of cap space. They have no quarterbacks either. Which one of their quarterbacks might be our quarterback? So who knows?
Yeah. That's why I differ from you a little bit on the dead money, because the dead money is taking up a lot of our cap space right now.
Well, I mean, but see, the problem that I have with that is I understand what you're saying, right? And I understand what other people say. But cap space is cap space. What you're talking about is we could have more cap space if we didn't have the dead money.
Right.
I don't care about that. I care about how much cap space do you actually have right now. The dead money doesn't change that at all.
But the dead money is taking up cap space this year. That's the problem.
But the point to that is, if it wasn't dead, they're on the roster and it's still on the. It doesn't matter to me. I care about how much space you actually have right now.
I would prefer to have that, whatever it is, with the. I don't know how much dead money.
I know.
30 million or something.
I know what you mean by that, and it's just a matter of being smarter.
Yeah.
But right now,
don't give Daniel Jones $160 million contract.
But right now, it to me, it doesn't matter. I don't care how much dead money it is, as long as you get me space to get what we want. Because the players we have is the players we have. Doesn't matter. You can fix that any way you want. Good teams get around that. Yeah. How did Denver become? They ate. What did they eat? Like almost $80 million on the cap.
Yeah.
By getting rid of Wilson, but they thought that was worth it to move on. We were stupid, and we tried to run it through with Jones, got rid of him in the middle of the season. It opened cap space. So anyway, that offensively, that's really kind of the only thing I could think of for
because this
space.
is going to tie in with the defense. So again, I would say we would be in much prettier situation if Hyatt and Neal weren't so far bust. So, and that ties in with
Right.
the defense. I actually see us having more needs on defense, and we'd be in a much better situation if Deontay Banks, first round draft pick, wasn't coming off a horrific season. If Kayvon Thibodeau, not a bust, but not the impact pass rusher you expected him to be, but if he was the impact guy, first round, 5th overall pick, if he was, we'd be having a different conversation. So again, I'm throwing this out here because people keep talking about, and they keep talking about the process. Well, the process isn't working great, or you would be thinking, we're talking about 3 first round draft picks here. Neal, Thibodeau, Banks, not living up to their expectations. And if they were, we'd be having a completely different conversation here.
Neal is pretty much guaranteed of being on the Giants roster this year, unless they trade him. We could cut him. But the thing is, he gains us nothing by doing that.
I don't see any reason to cut him right now, but I don't.
But even from
I wouldn't count on him.
But even from a salary cap perspective is what I'm talking about. If you cut him prior to June 1st, it gains us no cap space. If you cut him post June 1st, it gains us no cap space.
Right.
The only cap space that can be gained by Neal not being here is if we trade him. Right. And I can't imagine anybody is going to trade for Evan Neal. No. So I think he's on this team regardless. It'll be interesting if they buy into we need to try him at guard.
This is as make or break as you can have with him. This is his make or break year. That's it. You know, he's got to think about whether he's going to be in the NFL, not just the Giants at this point. Because
and as far as anything else goes, I mean, that's kind of it for our offense as far as cap goes of anything that's kind of going to matter. I will say the Giants have an inordinately large number of people that are going to count over $1 million on the cap. I mean, guys that you would think are like, what do they do?
Yeah. Some of that's the way the minimums are now, though.
So, like,
I agree when you look at it, but then you're like,
Ross Blacklock is going to count $1 million on the cap.
But see that he's got the veteran minimum for where he's at right now. So that's the Giants.
And that's where the draft hurts
spending a lot. If it wasn't for Daniel Jones, they wouldn't be in horrific. They're not in bad cap position, but they'd be in much better cap situation than they'd be. And the problem is Andrew Thomas. They're spending a lot of money on him. It was a good contract when they signed him, but he just can't stay healthy.
Right. But that's where the draft
made decent. It's why the Daniel Jones thing is such an outlier.
Yeah.
That's the one where you're like, what were you doing with the money? Most of the free agent stuff that they've done since Shane's been here, they don't spend a lot of money on free agents. Burns was the exception with the trade. But the other guy that the 2 guys that they probably overpaid, but it wasn't terrible deals, was originally Mark Lewinsky, who didn't work out, and then Nunez Roches, who
he's wickedly overpaid.
Yeah, and I agree with Cy. That's probably time to move on with him. But and again, they're not outrageous contracts. So before people start going, those were horrible deals. They weren't terrible deals because they weren't a ton of money, but they're overpaid. Same with Singletary. If they knew Singletary was going to get as few stamps as he did this year, I don't know if they would have signed Singletary to the deal that they gave him.
Yeah, I think a lot of what happens with the Singletary piece comes back to the comments during Hard Knocks about people like Josh Jacobs and things like that, talking about wear and tear and all this stuff. And then you see the contracts that those guys got, which weren't really that different than what you gave Singletary. And then Singletary hardly plays. Nunez Roches, by the way, he's $5 million on the cap. If we cut him pre-June 1st, we will pick up $3.6 million in cap space by doing it. I suspect he's going to be released.
He doesn't do anything for you either. That's the other thing. So
he's been I was really disappointed in Tampa. He was a decent player, but I don't know what happened.
Yeah, and you would have thought, I was going to say he was with good players or better players, but he was next to Dexter. So yeah, I think the Giants telegraphed in Hard Knocks what they're going to do on defense already. They wanted, even even not knowing that Banks was going to have a horrible year, they wanted another outside corner.
Yeah.
Now they didn't mean need two, but so we know that, and that's why corner is still very much in discussion for the third overall pick. Because if you can get a really elite corner there, and people are all over the place with Hunter. You and I have kind of been down, but a lot of people think he's going to be a really good corner. And they also talked in Hard Knocks about defensive tackle. And I think so. I think they've telegraphed that now because Tibbs hasn't lived up to what we thought. The Penn State Carter, the end, is also in the discussion. But I think defensive tackle, corner, and then they've got a financial decision on Pinnock at safety. They can move Belton in there, and you can always get safeties lower late in draft. But again, so it's sort of the biggies on defense to me are defensive tackle, cornerback, and maybe edge now, because do you count on Thibodeau moving forward?
Yeah, that's boy. He has. I've said this a couple times before, even a couple of years ago, and I got blasted by some people because I said he's an almost guy. He almost makes a big play. He almost gets that sack. He does have stats, but those are an accumulation of stats in losing seasons that don't mean a whole lot to me. They weren't game-changing plays other than Washington 2022. That sack,
was one of the plays,
touchdown.
by the way, on that list, on that top 100 videos, because it was such a fantastic play.
It was awesome. It was
when
awesome.
He made that play in Washington, and it wasn't just that play. He had a great game that night. He had an LT-like game in that game against Washington. He was all over the field and in the backfield during that game, not just against the pass, but against the run. And I thought that was the start of, oh my God, if this is really Thibodeau. But you're right. It's like weird. You look at the end of the year and you see his stats, and they're not bad stats, especially, remember, he missed 5 games. But then you're like, well, when the hell did those plays happen? Because I don't really remember them. Or some of them are like a naked bootleg where he was unblocked and he got, he made a play, that kind of thing. So, sorry.
No, you're fine. No, Thibodeau, to me, there's just something about him. I just can't put my finger on it. I just don't like him. Not that I dislike him as a person. I just don't like him he's not a game changer. He's just not. And when you really need him to show up, he doesn't. He reminds me of a little bit better Kanavis McGee.
Oh, God.
He's a bigger guy, but he's a little lighter from the waist down.
You mean physically or production?
Well, his production's more than McGee's was, but physically, I just don't feel like he's the guy you can count on. And Burns, I like Burns, but Burns also is somewhat limited too. So I went back and I'm doing it right now. Looking real quick.
Burns had a good year.
Sure.
I know people don't want to think about that, but I went back and looked at.
But you look at his body. Look what he needs to do. Right. I'm looking back during Bowen's time as defensive coordinator with the Tennessee Titans.
Right.
They built their front around Jeffrey Simmons. I would say Jeffrey Simmons and Dexter Lawrence are fairly decent, comparable. They're a little different physically, but pretty much played similar type games. They could play the run. They were very physical inside, and they can rush the passer. Lawrence is more of a DT nose, where Simmons was more of a DT. If you wanted, he could have been a 3-4 end, but they both provided that interior physical presence. But they also had another defensive tackle. They went with Tier Tart. He was both 22 and 23. But they also had a nose tackle that they would play as well. They played more of a 3-man, or even in 23, a 4-man line. Then they used a guy like Burns, which was for them was Harold Landry, as an outside guy. The year before that, it was Bud Dupree. We need to get back to, we're doing too many of the 2-man line.
Oh, yeah, I know. I totally agree with that. But remember, Bowen, remember how Bowen's eyes lit up when they said we might get Brian Burns? He wanted Burns.
But he wasn't the only guy he was excited about. They talked about in free agency Clellan Ferrell, who ultimately went to the Raiders. Am I thinking of the right guy?
I don't remember that name.
Maybe it's Watson. Maybe it was. It doesn't matter. The defensive tackle for Miami that ultimately went to the Raiders. They were talking about, because he had played in Clemson on the same defensive line as Dexter
Oh, I know who
Lawrence.
you're talking about. Yes. Well, that's why we know they
can't
want a
remember his
defensive
name.
tackle. That's why I said we know they want it. And we know they need a tackle.
But this 2-man line bullshit, and then having Tibbs and Burns be de facto, we call them edges, but they're de facto defensive ends, almost like a wide 9 defensive end kind of thing. They're too small to be physical in a run game like that when you only got the 2 linemen in the middle. That's why I keep saying if we're going to keep doing this, we're wasting Dexter Lawrence, because you can take him out of a game very easily if you want to by putting 2 guys on him constantly and making the other guys be more physical, which they're not.
But Burns isn't going anywhere because of his contract.
Oh, I don't want him to go anywhere.
No,
but I think you put Burns and then you put an Abdul Carter on the other side who brings an LT-like bend. I swear to God, you watch him rush the passer.
Right.
I'm not saying he's LT, but one of the things that LT separated himself from a lot of people is he could change the angle of his pass rush. When he came around the corner, he put his shoulder in, he could almost be parallel to the ground the way he would lean. We don't have anybody who can do that.
Well, if the draft was happening today and the quarterbacks, look, I don't want Sanders right now. I have to take a deeper dive into this, but Sanders scares me. But if Ward's off the board and Carter's still there when the Giants pick, I'm picking Carter, right?
Over Hunter, the defensive back.
Yes.
Yes.
That's what I'm doing right now.
I agree.
Now, I may change. I haven't really, but that's what I would do. Because I'm a upfront line of scrimmage guy anyways. That's I mean, if you're gonna give me a corner at number 3, he's got to be like Dion. But Brian Burns, the thing with him is he had ankle, groin, Achilles, biceps, and neck injuries. He didn't miss a game despite all of that. There were a lot of weeks where he wasn't practicing, and it wasn't just that he got the almost 9 sacks. He got 8.5 sacks. He had 17 tackles for losses. So I mean, he was much better than people realize. Again, if he was on a good team with a team that was ahead, I can't imagine what his numbers would be. It's the Thibodeau thing hasn't worked out. And I think they can look, it's not a screaming need for them to replace. Sure. But like Cy has talked about, you can create an identity if you Carter and Burns with Dexter Lawrence, that changes your up front on your defense. But then what are you going to do at quarterback? But the other thing is corner's a mess.
Before we move to the back end of the defense, I've seen a lot of people on BBI post, bigblueinteractive.com, a lot post that they are interested in BJ Hill coming back. Thoughts on the Giants going after a BJ Hill and bringing him back?
Well, they got to get somebody, a veteran in free agency. Just the way I look at free agency is this, and you've said the same thing. The draft, you don't want to be forced into having to draft for need. So you try to fill as many holes as you can in free agency. And then so when you get to the draft, you don't have to reach. So I would at least get a defensive tackle that you can you could get by with. And then if nothing happens in the draft board doesn't fall the way you want it to fall, you're not screwed. So I would have. So Nunez was supposed to be like that, and he didn't work out. So like the quarterback position, I think they need to get a veteran defensive tackle and then also draft a defensive tackle. Same thing at cornerback, which we're going to move to in a second. I think they need to bring in a veteran and then also draft a cornerback. So I think that's the way I would operate. So I wouldn't just bring in one guy at both positions.
Agreed.
So that's where I am at with that. They don't have to be all stars. You don't have to break the bank at every free agent position. But I think they gotta. To me, on defense, the screaming need to me on defense is more so than even corner is defensive tackle. You can't play the Philadelphia Eagles if you can't stop the run.
Yeah.
And Washington's going to get better. And who knows what's going to happen in Dallas? But you've got to be able to stop the run in this division. And I don't like the corner situation right now, but the defensive tackle, I don't want to get run down. I don't want another team to run the ball down my throat. And that's
you have to establish what you want. Well, you have to establish what you are. What are you on defense? And then you get players to be that. If you're going to be physical, right? That's one of the things we talked about. We're going to be smart, tough, dependable. We're going to be physical, right? What would you say the bulk of our cornerbacks are? They're not physical. Andrew Phillips maybe now, but before
He
that,
is.
but
He is.
before
Flott's not, and
Fly,
Adoree,
Adoree
he's not going to be
Jackson's
that. Adoree's
not.
not
I
going to be.
mean,
And
Banks
Banks is weird
has
because
has not been.
Banks was that in college, and Banks flashed that his rookie year. He's big. Deontay Banks is an elite athlete who's really well built, and he has flashed the ability to come up and hit you. But last year he played like a pussy. So I don't know. To me, Deontay Banks.
He played disinterested.
Deontay Banks is the biggest disappointment on last year's team to me. Because I didn't have that high expectations for Daniel Jones.
Sure.
I was already writing off Evan Neal, and Thibodeau's up there, but Deontay Banks, oh my God, was it a bad year? I mean, I went back and reviewed all of the game reviews for him, and he did have a few games, believe it or not, in the first half of the year. The first half of the year was a roller coaster. He had a few games where he was bad, but he was with the guy. He just didn't turn around and play the ball. Then he had a couple of games where he actually was really good and shut down the guy. Like he had one game against Terry McLaurin. McLaurin didn't do anything. And there was a couple of games like that in a row. And then the roof collapsed on him. I don't know if his confidence got shot or what, but it was between the lack of effort and teams were just targeting him. He just, by the end of the year, it was like he was grabbing at people, and we remember because it's the most memory. Remember when the receivers were running downfield and he was practically tackling the guy?
Yeah.
And he wasn't even doing that early. So it was like his play deteriorated as the year went along. So I don't know what was going on with him. And that's one of the reasons why I think Jerome Henderson's not here right now.
Yeah,
I don't know if that's scapegoating or not at this point, because Jerome Henderson's not to blame for Deontay Banks playing like an idiot like that. I mean, Jerome Henderson's been in this league a long time and has gotten players to play at a decent level, including really bad corners that are no longer in the league. Like when Wink first came in, the Giants were playing corners that aren't even in the NFL.
Sure.
And Fabian Moreau was our other starting corner for half the year, and there were even guys that are worse than that. So I don't blame Henderson for Banks per se, but it's clear that Banks is probably one of the reasons why Henderson's not here right now.
I would think that's true. And if you're trying to make a reclamation project out of him, it's easier to do with a new voice than it is with the voice you've been listening to for the last 2 years. So if you feel like Banks needs to hear a different voice to get him back to where he was, just from a mental standpoint, it makes somewhat sense. If you're not already happy with the way the unit played to begin with, then the two things together makes a lot of sense. I will say this: he's had 2 interceptions in 2 years.
Well, that's a problem across the board in the Giants secondary. It's astounding.
His tackles went from 64 combined to 52.
The weird thing is I actually like our safeties, but our safeties don't make plays on the football. They had, between Pinnock and Nubin, they had, I think, 2 pass defenses, and I don't think they had an interception. Did Nubin have I don't think Nubin had an interception.
I don't believe so, and that's what we counted on him for, because he was a ball hawk.
Like 5 his senior year, and he was like that throughout college. He was a bit of a ball hawk. But our safeties didn't make any plays. Banks didn't make any plays on the ball. Flott is one of those weird guys that he just can't stay on the. And Henderson talked about this too. Flott is one of these guys that he starts playing better. He finally starts getting his act together, and then he gets hurt, and it sets him back.
Right.
It happened again this year. So I went back and looked at his games too, and he was getting better and better. And I was reading Cy's reviews, and it's like he was getting better and better and better. And then even Cy was saying maybe we can count on him, and then he got hurt again. And part of that's because he's built like a toothpick. He's just, so if you're Bowen and you play a lot of zone and you want a physical corner, like remember when we had Perry Williams on with the Giants and we were
absolutely
talking about zone
Mhm.
zone defense, cover 2, and you got to have to be physical against the run. We got 2 guys. So when people say, "What's our problem on run defense?" and they say our linebackers, it's our linebackers, it's our defensive line. No, it's not always those guys. A lot of times it's the corners and the safeties, and I don't think it's our safeties, but it's the corners who can't play the run. And I think that's a lot of it. A lot of it with the Giants is a lot of times there's gap responsibility, and I think a lot of times the corners aren't there. So right now, when I look at the Giants, we knew going into the 2023 draft because of Hard Knocks, the Giants thought they were set at one corner. They had Banks. We know they wanted another outside corner, and they didn't get it. And we talked about this in the preseason that when we got to this offseason, the Giants were going to have to address defensive tackle and they were going to have to address corner. We said that back in September when you and I were on the show. We said next offseason is when they're going to have to do. No, we
Right.
weren't thinking about Thibodeau and we weren't thinking about Banks. We were thinking about what they had now. But the problem with now is Banks. That's why I'm saying if Banks and Thibodeau were all right, it wouldn't be that bad. But now they're not all. We were questioning them. It looks a lot worse. That's where we're with those guys. So
Yeah, and just one thing real quick is Perry Williams, when he played for the Giants, was really known as being a physical corner, a guy who could run a lot, but he also wasn't the greatest player of the ball. He
no, he
wasn't.
wasn't. No, he doesn't like. Yeah,
However, 84 he had 3 interceptions. 85 he had 2. 86 he had 4. He went 1 1 3 3 0 1 0. Banks has 2 in his 2 years as a shutdown corner. 2.
yeah.
So he plays the ball very poorly in the air. That's a real problem. He gets very grabby, which was a knock on him coming out, that he can be a little handsy, but he gets totally, I mean, he freaks out. It becomes a full-on, I tackled the guy when I don't know where the ball is. That's a problem.
And that got worse. That wasn't there early in the year. He wasn't turning around. By the end of the year, he was like what you're just talking about. He got worse as the year went along.
To make matters worse for the Giants, in the Indianapolis game, which we offensively were blowing Indianapolis out, the only reason Indianapolis is even in that game and getting some of the points that they did is because they just kept targeting and picking on Banks, and he kept getting penalties deep down the field on plays that there was no need to do what he did. All he had to do was look for the ball. He literally tackled Alex Pierce. I think I'm trying to remember if it was Downs was the other one that he tackled. He created enough extra points for Indianapolis that they were even in that game.
Right.
It was in a game in which we didn't want to win. You compounded it even more by actually making it close, that we were blowing them away. So yeah, there's a lot of problems on the team. I will say, draft wise, one of the things that when you get to be a good team, this becomes more prevalent. But when you're a bad team, it tends to show up the other way. If you look at the Giants in 86, 89, those 2 drafts are amazing. Those are teams that were pretty well off to begin with. The 88 team didn't make the playoffs, but very easily could have made the playoffs. They had a lot of talent on the roster. The 86 team was the 85 team coming off. We made the playoffs, lost to the Bears. We were coming into 86 as being a team that was considered to be a contender. Those 2 drafts, we had a lot of picks. We nailed a ton of them. The people that we got in that 86 draft contributed in the 86 season, but they were core members of the 90 Super Bowl team.
Like Eric Howard. Eric Howard was a huge factor in the Giants 1990 season.
Howard, Johnson, Collins.
Yeah.
You could say Lasker because he was on the team.
He was actually the most disappointing of the second round draft picks, and when they drafted him, I love that pick. And
John Washington is in that draft.
Yeah, and he was big because when Eric Dorsey went down with an injury, John Washington came.
And then you skip to 89, right? And so that 89 team, Brian Williams was the first pick, but he wasn't a huge contributor then. But you get guys like, Lewis Tillman was in that draft. Howard Cross is in that draft. Dave Meggett's in that draft. Trying to think, Bob Cratch is in that draft. These are all guys that contributed. So you had draft picks in 86 and draft picks in 89. They were key core members of the 90 Super Bowl team. So The Giants' problem is we're constantly drafting and trying to throw. We're trying to pick, as the whack-a-mole thing that John C. give him credit. John C. brings up that idea. You're using the draft to fill holes, which is what free agency is supposed to be for. The draft is let's get as many really good players. And sometimes you go by position. That's true. You have needs, so you get them. But you cluster draft sometimes, though, to make sure you fill in the back end of your roster. So when we looked at the salary cap, and you mentioned it, the vet minimums, right? You're just like, well, those are vet minimums. The reason the Giants have so many vet minimums is we don't have a lot of draft picks that really have become core members of the team that you can slot in a bunch of new draft picks, younger guys, to be those backups.
And why do the Eagles are so strong is they get these comp picks like crazy, and they have a lot of cheap players and a lot of picks, and they end up hitting on a number of them. So there's a lot to be said to acquiring picks, and it's like having more shots at the dartboard, and you'll hit some of them. So
it's why I would be totally happy if
trade down.
If we don't have Ward, if that's the guy we want at the top, and even if let's say Sanders too, let's say Sanders is the other one. If they go Ward, Sanders in whatever order, 1, 2, move down. You don't need to get a plethora of picks. You get a few, and maybe we move down again and we get a few more picks, because our team is lacking in depth in a number of areas. Go young and save money and get some young guys that might turn out to be massive members later on. But you can fill it.
In late April, the Giants will trade up for Shedeur Sanders and give away this draft and next year's draft. No. God, I hope not. Look, if Shedeur Sanders turns out to be great, then that would be the right move to do. But anyways, finishing up at corner. So they've got Banks under contract, Andrew Phillips, who I think had a decent rookie year. He started off. He had a much better, I think, first half, and I think, again, rookies tend to wear down as the year go along. But I like the attitude he brings to the defense. He's physical.
Yeah.
But again, another guy that doesn't make a lot of plays on the ball. But as a nickel, he's exactly what you want, because he can play the run. He made a lot of tackles, and he made a lot of tackles for losses, and so I think they're okay with that. Flott is one of those guys that I think he would be all right if he's like your third or fourth corner.
Yeah.
But there's not really anybody else here. The one guy who started his one start, he played really well, and he got an interception, was Trey Hawkins, and then he got hurt and he missed the rest of the year. So Hawkins is one of these teases that, again, his rookie year, Wink talks him up. Camp, he's a star. He comes into the season, he gets abused. They bench him. We think maybe this year, maybe he'll challenge. They finally put him in. He actually does really well against New Orleans. He has a good game against them. It's not just the interception. He actually looks like decent, but he gets hurt and he misses the rest of the year. So we don't know what we have in Trey Hawkins, who looks the part, but he's from Old Dominion, and we have no idea if he's could even play in the NFL. So corner is a ginormous
need.
They're going to have to sign somebody, and they're going to have to draft somebody. Defensive tackle, sign somebody, and draft somebody. And then the rest of the roster on defense, you'd like to improve, but you only have so many picks and so many free agent resources. That's where I'm at. And then the big wild card there is, if Carter's there, do you let Thibodeau? Does Joe Shane have so much pride that he won't admit the mistake with Thibodeau? I don't know.
Well, the question is, do we pick up his 5th-year option? I got to assume we're probably going to.
We're certainly not going to do that with Neal.
Neal's definitely not going to get it.
Thibodeau probably, right? Probably.
I would think so, unless the Giants are feeling different about him. And if they are, then they are going to make him prove it. But if that's the case, then you're willing to package him in a deal this year to move to do whatever you want. So if you want a quarterback, you might package Thibodeau. So you might be saying, okay, I don't want to do the 5th-year option piece because that's not going to be, he's not going to be here. I got to assume they will, because you can't count on the fact that if Sanders drops to 3, you're probably taking Sanders. Let's just, for now, let's say that. if Sanders dropped to 3, you took Sanders, so you didn't get Carter. You don't have that other edge guy. There are other ones you can get, but you can't count on that they're going to be better than Thibodeau is. So I got to assume he's good enough that you're going to make sure you got it covered, because it spreads the cap hit out a little bit too.
I wish they had somebody on their staff that could just get under Thibodeau's skin. LT was a Hall of Fame all-time great, and nothing's ever going to change that. But part of the thing is Parcells got under his skin too.
Yeah, he did.
He used to, he used to piss LT off. He would get, and Parcells did that. Parcells, one of the beauties of Parcells was he was a master psychologist. He would get inside the players' heads and get them to play. He knew what motivated a player. And Thibodeau needs somebody to. I think Thibodeau can be a much better player than he is, but he doesn't. It's not a week-to-week thing, play-to-play thing. And I don't want to say he takes plays off, but I just don't think he plays with his hair on fire. I wish he could get somebody on the staff that would get under his skin and just irritate him and just like, oh, I'm going to take it out on the Commanders. I'm so pissed off at my coach. And that's what they did with that's what Parcells did with LT. That by the end of the game, I mean, Jim Burt started, it wasn't Harry Carson that started the Gatorade dunks. It was Jim Burt, who did it after a Redskins game, who was so pissed off at Parcells after a week of practice, and they beat the Redskins, that he dumped the Gatorade on Parcells, and all the players were mortified. They didn't know how he was going to react to it. That's how the Gatorade thing started. It became a.
Do you remember the player that Parcells specifically said to get under LT's skin?
No, I don't think so.
Leading up to the game against New Orleans, he basically said right in front of me, he goes, maybe we can just switch you with the 56 from over there so we can get. They were talking about Pat Swilling. Pat Swilling was the guy. So just
is that the famous game, the New Orleans game where he played?
No, that was that would be the
86.
That would be the 86 game.
Okay, yeah, he went off. That was the one where we fell behind. And
I think it might even have been 85 when Bavaro got cracked in the jaw. Or no, that was 86 that he got cracked in the jaw. Yeah. It was definitely, I think it was 86. He told them basically, if we could just switch you with the other 56, that would be.
That was the game where the Giants were losing and they came back and won
17-0. Yeah. They were down 17-0 first quarter.
Yeah. So, anyways, that's my, and then again the sort of go for full circle. They've got tough decisions on special teams. So, like you said, this may be the time to say goodbye to Gano. Kreider again is a free agent. There's something to be said to having a stability at long snapper, but he's expensive because he's really old. And then Jamie, the punter, has been all right. I mean, it's nothing. I wouldn't, if there's somebody else out there, I wouldn't. So that's where I am.
I would think he's going to want a little bit of money because I mean, he could probably get a decent deal with somebody else. I don't want to overpay for a punter. I don't want to overpay for a kicker.
Statistically, he's not up there. He's below average. Statistically, net punting, gross punting, he's not up there. He's got a strong. I think they like him because he's got the potential. The one thing he's gotten really good at, which he was horrible at, was punts inside the 20. He's gotten really good at that. So he only had 3 touchbacks this year, and he had a bunch of inside the 20 punts. He's gotten really good at that, and he was bad at that. So he's getting better. He could be one of these punters after he leaves the Giants, or if he stays with the Giants, who's much better than he is now. But he's not like Sean Landetta or Jennings or anything like that. He's not, I wouldn't. He's not even Fiegels. Fiegels was a really.
I was just going to say that.
Fiegels was a really underrated punter. I mean, I wish we had. Fiegels is active on social media, so I wish we had him back here too. So
we should try to talk to him.
Yeah.
All right. So we've gone on pretty long. So we will one of the things we're going to do is we're going to break down kind of some now off-season options. What's next? Which
we're going to go live.
We're going to do a live one. We will let you know when that's going to be. It'll be soon.
And we're going to have, I don't know if you want to spill the beans, but we're going to have a fellow podcaster.
I think it's pretty safe. We were going to do it this week. Some things came up. It came up for me. And I want to make sure I say the name right. It's Adriana. I think is it Lafola? I'll have to pronounce her last name better, but anyway, she does the everything
New York Giants.
New York Giants. podcast. She's going to be a guest. So yeah, we got some
And
stuff.
Gary wants to come on, and we still want to do some historical stuff. But I'm looking forward to the live broadcast that we're going to do. Maybe we'll take live questions.
Well, and you'll be able to, because the chat piece will be running, so people will be able to chat, and we'll be able to see that.
Now, real quick, and we're not going to go into long details. We're going to wrap this up. We didn't do it. We're going to hand out our 2024 New York Giants awards. Who's your defensive player of the year, offensive player of the year, rookie of the year for the Giants?
Yeah, defensive is really tough because of just the number of injuries, so guys didn't make it the full season kind of deal. I kind of feel like I thought he would be more, but I can't say that he was not enough. So I'm gonna go with Burns. It would have been Lawrence, but he got injured, so he really didn't get. Burns played the entire year. I thought he brought a little bit to the table, and if the Giants actually put people in obvious passing situations, I think we could have seen a lot more from him. But the fact that he continued to go out there, even while injured, you mentioned it multiple times, he did put up numbers. I think he could put up much better numbers with some more healthier surrounding staff and the Giants being a better team. I'm going to go with Burns.
Right, and I'm going to go with Dexter. Simply, even though he just played 12 games, 9.5 sacks in 12 games for a nose tackle is insane. Plus, he had I think a personal high in tackles for losses, and Burns is close, but I just thought Dexter was on en route to his best season until he got hurt. So I that's why I put him there. But Burns is its close second, an honorable mention for me. And then your offensive player of the year?
Well, that's a tough one. We were so bad.
Or do you want me to go first?
You go first.
Well, I don't know how you pick anyone but Neighbors. I know they force-fed him the ball, but he had a litany of injury issues that he played through. I'm trying to look it up right now. Wait a minute, because I just typed it up. Wait a minute. Malik. All right, Malik had, where the hell is it? He missed 2 games with a concussion. Then he had knee, groin, hip, foot, and toe injuries. And despite all that, he set the franchise record for catches, and he had the rookie record until the tight end beat him. So I mean, with 4 different quarterbacks. So I don't know how you pick anybody. And there are people on the website saying, "Oh, that's not, anyone today in 2024 numbers." I don't care. With that situation, with all those injuries, being a rookie, and having Tim Boyle and Daniel Jones and DeVito and Drew Lock, their quarterback. I'm sorry, because of that, he's my rookie of the year as well too.
So you can't argue with that. And the argument that people just gave you just a second ago, oh yeah, you could do that, blah blah. Okay, but on this Giants team, during this 2024 year, there wasn't anybody else doing anything that you could possibly. The runner-up for me, because I'll go with the same as you, the runner-up for me would have been Illuminor, because he did bring a much different presence. He made a much different presence to the offensive line. They should have switched him to left tackle the second Thomas went down. I don't know why they chose to be we don't want to move too many chairs. So instead of moving a chair, we're gonna put out a freaking stool. Instead of putting a full-on chair, we'll put a stool out there in a Zudu, which is so stupid. I thought Illuminor brought a lot, but you can't go 109 catches, 1,200 yards. It's got to be Neighbors, even if you expected more with a better quarterback. Yeah. I say it's Neighbors too. Rookie of the year, I think it's got to be the same thing. Tyrone Tracy would be next, of course, but he didn't have we're just saying it because he's a 5th-round pick and he turned out to be really good for the Giants. That doesn't mean he was the best rookie on the team. That's Neighbors. It's not even close. So
right, he had the fumbles. But I will say
that does scare me, by the way.
There is a clip on YouTube. I recommend people, it may even be from the Giants, a clip of Tracy's highlights. They're pretty good. So
sure.
If you say you got to run, the thing that's really interesting about him is he only played running back. He was converted, he's a wide receiver.
Yep.
And he only played, I think he had 6-year college career. So I think 4 years he was wide receiver, and I think 2 years he was a running back. For him to be as instinctive as he is as a running back, if he can fix the fumbling, I still would like to add another guy, because I don't think he's a full-time guy.
Agreed.
But to get him, that was a good, really, really good pick. my dog shit players of the year. I know we weren't going to do this.
No, but I'm glad you were
Deontay
bringing it up.
Banks is number
For
one on
sure.
offense. And I had to double check on Jalen Hyatt because people are going to say, because I'm always in Jalen. Jalen Hyatt's on there too because he had 8 catches for 62 yards, despite the fact that he had, I think he had about 30% of the snaps. I'd have to go back and double check that. Um, Deontay Banks easily is the most disappointing player on this team. And a team filled with disappointing players like Evan Neal, I think Banks by far. I did not see this coming. That was bad.
He was horrifyingly bad. He's a guy that we could get rid of him tomorrow and it would be okay with
He
me.
needs to rebound in a big way, or he may not have an NFL career. That's how bad he was. So
here's a piece for you. Because you've been a little bit of a Hyatt apologist to a degree. I found somebody else with somewhat comparable stats, receptions, and then yards and yards per catch.
Alex Bachman.
No, but I am sticking with the Giants. So these are Hyatt's numbers so far as in his career. 31 receptions, 435 yards, no touchdowns, and he averages 14 yards a catch. A guy
and all his yardage per catch numbers came from last year. He had really good yardage per catch last year.
But even then, it was only 16.2.
I can't believe he doesn't have a touchdown. I cannot believe he doesn't have a touchdown.
So I wanted to find somebody else comparable to number of receptions. Hyatt has 31 in his career, so I found another guy pretty close.
On the team right now or previously?
No, previously. 29 receptions, 394 yards, averaging 13.6 yards per reception and no touchdowns as well. And that would be Ramses Barden. So
another player who I thought was going to be a decent player.
Who was a much bigger dude.
I thought Ramses Barden was going to be a decent player.
And so there you go. Very similar stats between Hyatt and Ramses Barden. You got to hope. Yeah, Banks to me, absolute dog crap. The other guy, though, that I would say the biggest disappointment I had was the fact that Evan Neal never seemed to get past the injury piece and become part of, like, he was literally so bad that we kept him on the roster for some reason, but never put him into play until we were forced to play him.
Yeah, but then when he finally gets back on, he has another injury that pops up, his hip injury. So he can't. The one thing that drives me nuts with Evan Neal, and the one thing that a lot of Giants fans still don't understand / appreciate, if that's the right word, is when Evan Neal does play, he's never healthy. To the point where he's not even practicing. So he kept, and maybe it's because I have to update the front page with the injury report, but Evan Neal missed so many practices this year because they have a hip injury. And so it's like, why does he keep getting hurt? He's a big guy. He never had this issue in college getting hurt. Why is he constantly hurt here now? So it's like, and he missed all the spring. He missed most of the summer because he was coming off the previous injury. So people are like, well, why didn't they play him at guard? Well, because he never practiced that guard because he was hurt the whole time.
There is also the mindset that says, why didn't you just leave him on the pup if you thought he wasn't healthy enough to practice consistently and play, which is what they said. And I know you said, well, he's got to get reps and they need to be, but they never used him. So if you thought he wasn't healthy, why take him off the pup?
Well, they actually ended up playing him, but then he got hurt again.
But they played him when
he didn't play in the finale, but he played. And then you go back and you read the game by game things, and it was like, there are flashes of times at tackle where because you're looking for something. As a Giants fan, you're just looking for like
a glimmer
of hope. And you're like, oh man, did you see that run block? Or there was one good play. There were games where he was mostly okay, but usually it's because they put a tight end over there.
Yeah, he was never. There was never.
And it got to the point where it's like, you know what? We're making excuses for him. He just doesn't. He looks so labored in his movements, and he looks so clumsy. And that's what drives me crazy. Is he didn't look like that in college. He didn't look clumsy. He looks clumsy now.
For a very amazingly athletic big guy, in the videos that you saw leading up to when he was drafted, being able to jump up and do the split and do all this stuff. He seems like a very athletic guy. He is like the guy who has two left feet dancing. He just never seems comfortable. He never seems smooth, and he ends up on the ground a lot.
He is so clumsy that I'm not sure he can play guard. So that's where I'm at. I have to throw this out because you would appreciate this. So I told you, I told you about that 100 clips.
Sure.
Look for that too. It's broken up into 5 different things because it's so long. But in the quality's not good. But there are some plays in there that are like you've kind of forgotten. Like when we in Jim Fossil's first year when they won the division and when they were in Dallas. And there was Dallas went for on 4th and inches at the end of the game, and they stopped it, and the Giants win the NFC, stuff like that. But they showed the 3rd and 31 play against Denver in the snow. Everyone thinks of the Gary Reasons hit, but in that play was the Dave Meggett 59-yard
screen pass. Yep.
William Roberts made that play.
Oh, absolutely.
William Roberts got out and leveled.
I think it's Simon Fletcher. Oh, is it Mecklenburg?
I think it might have been Mecklenburg. Or
it's one of the two. One of those two guys.
Somebody. Yeah. But William Roberts was, as you brought up repeatedly, hopefully Evan Neal can turn into a William Roberts type player. But I'm not even sure about that at this point. So
yeah, William Roberts was definitely known as the guy who had the feet. It wasn't. He just didn't seem to always have the anchor as a tackle, that he kind of was a little soft as a tackle. But when you put him at guard and when he played next to Jumbo Elliott,
he had a good career.
That was the bonding moment. And people forget Jumbo Elliott failed horribly in his start at right tackle.
He was terrible at right tackle.
The fact that he
would be like, why would he be good at left tackle? He was so terrible at right tackle.
And it just clicked. And that's the thing with Neal, is it just hasn't.
Wouldn't that weird if Andrew Thomas can't play anymore and they have to put Evan Neal over there, and then Evan Neal finally ends up
I can't see
I don't think that's going to happen, but that would be weird.
But we'll see.
That was like with Jumbo Elliott. Jumbo Elliott played that game. That game with Mark Collins that we had Mark Collins on, where Mark Collins got burned by Jerry Rice at the end. Jumbo Elliott was a train wreck in that game against the 49ers.
No.
Wasn't he?
No, he did not play that game.
Didn't he? I thought he did.
No, it was Dallas. He played Dallas he was starting for the first time against Dallas and Ed Too Tall Jones, and Jones had 4 sacks on Elliott.
So, are you saying that Elliott didn't play in that 49er game? I thought he did.
I'm going to look it up right now. I'm pretty positive. Okay. I'm generally pretty good about that.
It might be the drinking's catching up to me.
But I know it was against Dallas.
I cannot have a drink in the future, by the way, with a baseball cap. It doesn't work. It's like bang. All right, and I know we probably after you.
We do need to remember, but I'm going to look it up real quick.
By the way, look forward to our live broadcast. It's going to be more
and shorter. Sure.
Yeah, it's never going to be short.
I'm trying to see.
Well, we can bring it up on the next one.
Yeah, I'll look it up to confirm, but I'm pretty positive I'm right. Well, wait,
Ray in Arlington will correct me on this.
Carl Nelson was the starter at right tackle for the Giants against the 49ers in 1988. No, he started the game against Dallas. And because Carl Nelson got nicked, I think he got nicked up and whatever. And then ultimately they found out that I think he had the cancer had returned. And he ends up ultimately retiring from the team at the end of that year. But it was Jumbo Elliott's first game. I believe it was week 4 against the Cowboys, but it was in Dallas. And he threw up before the game. Sims talks about it all the time. And he gave up 4 sacks to Ed Too Tall Jones.
No, I'm not saying that didn't happen. I thought he also played right tackle against the 49ers.
Mm-mm. And remember, afterwards, it was so bad that LT went to Parcells and said, listen, this Riesenberg guy is the guy we should be putting out there from practice. He goes, put him out there at right tackle. He play him. Yeah. And that's how Riesenberg ultimately became the right tackle. Elliott ends up moving over to take left tackles. I think Eric Moore got hurt, I think, at some point, because he took over for Roberts.
Yeah.
So we had a revolving door until the end of the year, and then it was Elliott, Roberts, Oates. Moore was then kind of playing right guard. I think he was off and on with Damian Johnson, but Moore, right. And then Doug Riesenberg was the right tackle.
Well, we got to do the show with Larry and
Oh
Matt,
yeah,
and
going
we'll
back
do
in
a
time.
season. Yeah,
I love that
we'll
stuff.
put highlight plays in there too. Probably get in trouble with the NFL, but
Well,
all right. All right. On that note, sorry it went long, guys. It went way too
it went
long.
way long. My wife's gonna laugh. I told her it's about an hour, maybe an hour tight. She goes, sure it will be.
Yeah. All right. On that note,
So-
no one's gonna watch this because if you stay to the end, God bless you.
Like, subscribe, all that good stuff. We will let you know when the live one's going to be next week. Appreciate it, and we'll catch you again soon.